Rick, pleasure to speak to you for the first time.
Oh, it's a pleasure, Mario, to speak to you.
Well, you were just telling me before we started this, you've been speaking to a lot of people that are involved in different aspects of this war, because it's no longer US, Israel versus Iran. I think more countries than I can count have been dragged into it. I was actually just on another interview with Cenk, and during that interview, let me see if I can find it. There was a tweet by an Emirati billionaire. He owns a group called the Al Habtoor Group, I think. And it was a tweet. I literally got it, and it was pretty shocking to me. It was a tweet that essentially blasts Trump for this war and for dragging the Gulf into this war. That's from a billionaire or an influential person in an allied nation to the US. And a lot of people were saying this war, especially if it drags on, will become a long-term liability for the US beyond munitions, but also alienating American allies, the Gulf nations, which Trump and others have spent so many years building. Can you hear the alarm?
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I just got the alarm now. So this is the second alarm today. That's the first day. Oh, it's one out. This is the first day.
What do they tell you?
It says thank you for your cooperation. Reassure you that this is the opposite. So we had an alarm earlier saying that stay away from windows, which I'm not doing. Stay away from windows. There's a risk, etc. So this one is that's the first time I get one that says the opposite. This one says, so the other one was half an hour ago. This one says, thank you for your cooperation. We reassure you that the situation is currently safe. You may resume your normal activities while continuing to remain cautious and take the necessary precautions, blah, 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 and follow the instructions. So they're testing it out. This is like Dubai would have never expected to ever use those systems. Nobody, at least most analysts I spoke to, didn't expect the Gulf to be dragged into this. But Rick, I'd love to get your thoughts on what I've said, but more importantly, the discussions you've been having behind the scenes and on your show.
Well, the breaking news I think that I was just able to get, I was just on with Saudis. I've been trying to grab as many people as I can, and I'm in a really unique situation where I can do that because I have automatic and instant access to Beijing, to Qatar, to Saudi Arabia. We're talking to my sources. As you know, you probably watched, I was just in Iran. I left Iran just in time, I guess you might say. I mean, from the standpoint of what could have happened to me and my crew. And now I have the advantage of being able to talk to different sources. I just got off with some Saudi sources. And basically what I wanted to do with them was try to understand where they were from a production standpoint when it comes to oil. There's lots of stories going around that oil is going to rise like crazy. Just the opposite, in fact. We've seen oil prices going down, and the reason oil prices are going down, he explained to me, and probably will continue to either be flat or stay down, is because way before this happened, they put all their ships out to sea, heading to all the different ports, which makes you, I know what you're thinking, Mario. You're thinking, oh, so they were tipped off. Hell yeah, they were tipped off. I think they kind of, he didn't say this, but sounds like he got a call. They got a call, the Saudis, saying, do whatever you can to get every ship that you can fill with oil out right now, out of the Persian Gulf, out of the Strait of Hormuz, and head out. And that's exactly what they did. According to him, you got at least 2 months before we start to see any issues related to production problems from the Saudis. And then I said to him, interestingly enough, this is by the way, Professor Khalid Batarf, which, by the way, a lot of these guys are very much tied to the government, as you know, and they're part of the energy ministry. And I said, okay, so fine. What happens now? Those ships go out to sea. They unload their fuel and they come back empty. He goes, then we got a problem. So it looks like there's going to be an issue. When I pressed him on the question you're interested in from a geopolitical standpoint, I asked him, who are you going to hit? I mean, because I know you're angry with the Israelis for what they've done in Gaza. I know you're not exactly best friends with the Iranians, and you've got to feel bad for the United States because of what they've done, because they've put you in such a precarious perch. And my feeling from the Saudis, uniquely, is that they're pissed off at Iran, and if anything, they'll go after Iran.
That's what they said in public. They made a statement saying the same thing, and they might get involved militarily. You think behind the scenes, it's the same position? They're not pressuring the U.S. They're not pissed off or blaming the U.S. and Israel?
I've had two conversations with the Iranian foreign ministry. Obviously, I spoke with Arachi earlier, and Arachi had told me that he was having specific conversations with his counterpart in Saudi Arabia, which led me to believe immediately, just from a journalistic standpoint, that these guys have been talking for a while and kind of knew what was coming. And then I talked to the assistant foreign minister 3 days ago, and he essentially told me the same thing, that they feel like they have cordial conversations with Saudi Arabia, and that they've been able to make the Saudis understand that they're hitting U.S. installations and U.S. facilities, and they're not hitting Saudi civilians or Saudi installations, except, of course, when there's issues with their missiles, or when they have to go after specific U.S. personnel, because U.S. personnel have been moved, as you know, and put in some hotels.
But they've stuck the Fujairah pipeline in Dubai, which is the alternative to the Strait of Hormuz. By the way, on your first point, is a very interesting point, because a lot of people are speaking to traders in the energy market, and they also were surprised that prices did not spike as much as expected, not above $100. And that goes back to multiple reports that not only the Saudis, multiple countries, including Iran, were shipping out as much energy as they can, as much oil and gas as they can. And so there's a surplus in the market. I did not know it was 3 months. I thought it was about 2 weeks. So 3 months is probably in line with the rhetoric that we're hearing now, that this could last for months. So basically,
he might be exaggerating, but he's protecting his turf. He's Saudi. He says, "Oh no, Saudi oil is fine." As you might hear for anybody who has some kind of proprietary perspective on something like this. But he is talking about a couple of months at least before there's any problems at all, because of the pipelines that they use, obviously, on the other side, as well as the ships that they got out to sea. Because obviously, from my conversation with him, I get a sense that they were tipped off. Now, LNG is a different issue. LNG is going to be a problem because of the Qataris, and they're not going to be able to get much of that out. If anything spikes, it'll be LNG, not oil, for what it's worth. Not that I'm a trading expert or anything resembling such a thing. I'm just a journalist asking questions.
Europe is screwed, and even Putin yesterday threatened Europe that he'll cut the remaining exports that Russia has towards Europe. He might cut them off as well. He mentioned that yesterday, taking advantage of the situation, which benefits the US, because the US has a lot of gas, and it's filling the void that's left by Russia and now Qatar. So based on what you're seeing in all the discussions you're having, how long do you think this will last?
Could be a long time. And I think the reason it could be a long time is because of the Shia reaction that we're seeing. I spoke yesterday with Pakistani officials, but they're basically telling me
that's in Abu Dhabi. Just happened now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, hold on, let me open up for you. I just close the box.
Who's that? Who's that?
That's an impact in Abu Dhabi now.
Wow.
In the UAE. So it just happened now. So I was just saying I was talking to interviews earlier today. Sorry to interrupt you, Rick. I was telling people it seems to have quieted down. Still going on, but that context.
Well,
is
what my sources are telling me on that, since we're all over the place, and this is good. I like this kind of conversation. I hate when people come with prepared speeches to interviews, and I think you're fascinating, and you're obviously very plugged in. My sense is that the special satellite equipment that the Chinese got into the hands of the Iranians are a big part of the reason that the Iranian missiles are hitting their targets as effectively and as surprisingly effectively as they are. I think that I was always unsure as to whether or not, since the 12-day war to here, they've actually replenished and they've actually gotten new military hardware that they can use. But I think the big story here is the satellite systems being deployed that were sent from China that are being used to route the missiles and keep the missiles from being hit by the THAADs in particular is the reason that the Iranians are having so much success. Because I am blown away by how many Iranian missiles are hitting their targets. Blown away. I thought for sure U.S. anti-defense missiles would be much more effective than they are. And, you talk to people like Scott and Doug and others who know a hell of a lot more about military things than I do. And my sense from them is that they're blown away as well. They're like, Well, maybe not as much as we are, because they said we've got a problem with this type of stuff in the United States, and they've been talking about this for the last year, not just here but also in Ukraine, and now we're seeing it actually come to fruition, and I'm kind of surprised.
Yeah, it just came in as well now. The foreign minister of Iran, Arachi, just said the following: "We haven't asked for a ceasefire, and we reject any negotiations with America."
Yeah, that's what he told me. 3 days ago, I spoke with them and I asked him point blank, obviously, that question. I said, "Hey, are you guys going to talk?" Hell no. We got no interest in talk. No interest in talking to these people. And you know, a big thing is obviously the fact that they killed negotiators. Some of the people they killed were part of the negotiation team, and that really has pissed these guys off. The other thing is obviously, you know, the supreme leader being taken out along with his grandchildren. Yeah. And now add to that the 130 little girls or young girls or whatever it was, the number, I don't know. I've heard different numbers, but it's more than 100. Yeah. That makes you want to not negotiate with someone. And you know, and to be fair, would you? I mean, would anybody at this point? I mean, how many times can they negotiate not in good faith? Some people would call it a lie. I don't know if it's lying, but it wasn't negotiating in good faith. And, you know, now we're hearing that Witkoff was literally on the phone almost simultaneously with Israel and even Netanyahu himself and Netanyahu's intel people while he was negotiating with the Iranians. I mean, what the F, right? I mean, you're negotiating with me and you're really, so it makes you wonder, with all due respect to Mr. Witkoff, are you here negotiating or are you spying on me? It's a fair question.
Considering all this, how long do you think it will last? Because a lot of people are saying Iranians don't want to end it either because they want to inflict so much damage on the US. And they know that not they know, but they also believe, among other experts in the world, that American munitions stockpiles are getting depleted. And the US is spending a lot of money. The US and other allies are spending a lot of money to intercept every cheap drone. That continuing this war works in Iran's favor. And they want to inflict as much damage to ensure this never happens again. Because you had the 12-day war, and then you have this again. And if this ends soon, you might have it happen again in 6 to 12 months, as they say, mowing the lawn. Do you think that could be the case? And then how could you end the war early if both sides may not want to end it?
I wish I had more expertise.
Wants to win, and Iran wants to damage the US as much as possible to deter.
I wish I had more expertise on, you know, attrition from a military standpoint when it comes to both ammo and missiles. And I think one of the key questions here is for both sides, what does the US have left? What do the Iranians have left? Where does the US turn to? Because they're the supplier. Where's the US going to go for more missiles if they start running short? As Ritter and McGregor both say that they will run short. And then the Iranians, how much have they stockpiled? And how much are the Russians and maybe others like the Chinese willing to do to help them if they start having a shortfall? Because it comes down to military missile depletion in a case like this.
For Iran,
I think you're right about will. Yeah.
Yeah, for Iran, it's the launchers. So the US and Israel are striking their launchers. So they have a lot of missiles, but the launchers are getting hit. Now, it's impossible. Every analyst has their own analysis based on what their biases are. Because you speak to one person, they say Iran's launchers are almost fully depleted. Others say Iran still has massive capacity, but they're holding off, preparing for a long war of attrition. And then when it comes to US stockpiles, well, it's classified information on how many actual stockpiles the US has. But most experts, even ones that are, you know, very hawkish, they would tell you that stockpiles are getting depleted. There's reports that the US is pulling air defense systems from South Korea. There's even reports unconfirmed that they've requested Ukraine to send back some munitions that were sent to them. Again, that's unconfirmed. But yeah, so there's a good argument to be made that Iran might want to continue this war to further deplete American capacity. But at the same time, there's also a good argument to be made that Trump wants to continue this war till the regime is completely annihilated. which I think would be disastrous for the country. Have you seen the reports that apparently they're arming Kurds at the border to start creating civil war? That would be insane.
There's something paradoxical about the fact that the Kurds, who were gassed once, are now attacking Iran, a country that was also gassed by the same, by the way, chemical weapons that were supplied by the United States through Chile at the time. Chile, interestingly enough, at the behest of a guy named Donald Rumsfeld. So I don't know. Maybe it's one of those everything comes around kind of stories. But here we are, the Kurds now, who, along with the Iranians, were once gassed with chemical weapons, attacking the Iranians and coming out of Iraq to do so. Wow, something just never changed.
You know, the Kurds were a pawn in Syria as well, and they're being used and abandoned by many accounts, and now they're being used as a pawn again. To the original question, you think Gulf nations, other than Saudi, do you think they'll end up blaming the US and Israel for this, like we saw that Emirati billionaire? Or do you think they'll stand firm by America's side against Iran and blame Iran and maybe get involved militarily against Iran?
I think it's a unique opportunity for both Russia and China, and maybe even to a lesser extent, India, to suddenly build bridges and develop a relationship with countries that never abandoned Russia or China or India for that matter, but have always felt like their true big brother is the United States. And from an economic standpoint and from a military standpoint, they've been beholden to them. So I think what I'm seeing from the Gulf states, specifically Qatar, Bahrain, where they are really feeling the heat to not be on the side of the United States or Israel, especially Israel. I think little by little, if this continues, I think it strengthens that movement and strengthens that ideology, so that if this thing continues past a month or two, and somehow the U.S. hasn't been able to turn them against Iran from a military standpoint, then I think we'll start to see what is almost a protracted measure of discontent with both Israel vis-a-vis the United States. And that will be a big problem, because then we'll start seeing protests, and we'll start seeing people, ask for the United States to get the hell out, and then in these vassal countries, as some people call them, it's going to be hard for them to control that argument being made by a lot of people. I think that's what could happen.
Iran's foreign minister seems to be having an interview with NBC. So he said, we are fully prepared and ready. We are fully prepared and ready to deal with any possible ground invasion. And he just mentioned that point. We've heard the reports that Trump has not discounted the potential of having troops on the ground. And then he also
Senator Blumenthal just reported that. Senator Blumenthal went to a closed-door meeting with Trump officials, and he came out of that meeting and he immediately said, my biggest fear is coming to fruition. After hearing what the Trump officials told me, I think we'll have boots on the ground soon.
No way.
Yeah.
You think that is, I want to know what people are betting on this, like what people believe. But do you genuinely believe that's a possibility worth considering? Because it just seems so implausible after Iraq, Afghanistan, that anyone has any appetite for this. Like, that would be political suicide, as well as starting to get troops in coffins heading back home.
Let me read you this just to make sure. I'm checking myself to make sure I give you the right information. Here we go. Senator Richard Blumenthal says, and I just saw it a minute ago and suddenly it's not coming up. I think his quote was, after hearing from Trump officials, I am more fearful than ever that we are now heading toward putting boots on the ground and troops inside Iran.
U.S. forces. So there's another one here as well. I just look at what people are betting on, like because people can say one thing, but when they put their money somewhere, I'm like, fucking hell, they're taking it seriously. U.S. forces going into Iran by the end of the year, more than 60%, more than 50%. 60% of people bet their money that America will have troops on the ground. Now, that's pretty vague. I don't know if that means limited, maybe special forces, but any military presence, it means either obviously a ground invasion, Iraq, Afghanistan 2.0, or it's you let the country destroy itself through a civil war, and then you have bases there like you have in Syria. You have a footprint there after the country destroys itself. But either way, either one is as horrible as the other. For the country, I don't know how it's going to come out of this.
Well,
the
problem for, my president and the leaders of my country is that they don't really have a plan. I mean, and you could always tell when someone doesn't have a plan, when you could always tell when people don't have a plan, when in fact they're not able to articulate the reason they're even there. And think about this, Mario. Think about how many times we've heard different explanations for what we're doing. They're not willing to stop enriching uranium. They're close to having a bomb. They've got a terrible history. We're worried about the impact they could have on Israel. And now the latest is Marco Rubio, guy I grew up with in Miami, says, well, the reason we did this was because Israel was about to do it, and we didn't want Israel to go in on their own. To which then Trump said, no, that's not true. The reason we did it was because they were about to attack, and we wanted to preempt their attack. So, what the fuck is it, right? I mean, can you give us, can you do better than that? It's kind of troubling when your own government is not able to explain to you why they did something. And so if you don't know why you did it, now do you know what you want or what you're going to do?
What the plan is? Like there were talks that they were preparing for a 4-day operation, and now we're talking about a 4-week operation. Now there's people betting that when the war started, people were betting 65% chance that it will end by the end of the month. 65%. Now it's down to 25%. It will end this month. Like, my heart aches for Iranians. Such a beautiful country. As much as I hate the regime, by the way, I spent a long time attacking the regime, and I get criticized for it a lot. But what's worse than a horrible regime like Assad now, Iran is a country in civil, a failed state like Iran, like Iraq, like Syria, like Iraq, and potentially Iran.
If you break it, you own it. How do you fix it?
But is there enough appetite politically? Is there enough appetite for a ground invasion? Will people believe these excuses are given to them that they would accept a ground invasion?
No, and the big problem is more so than ever. See, when I worked at CNN, when I was the guy who did the news on CNN, and when I was the guy who did the news on NBC and Fox, it was easy for me to take my orders from the row and the other editors who basically controlled the information flow out of those places. And we basically control the information flow. If you live in America and you wanted to know what was going on with your country, you had to watch CNN, Fox, or MSC or MSNBC, or the big three, ABC and the late news for old people and stuff like that. Well, that's changed now, and because of alternative media and because of people like you and me and Tucker and others, Americans are getting a different story. One that doesn't come specifically from the administrative state or from the neocons or from Israel and, that faction. It comes from people who are truly challenging that belief and really making a case for it. People like Candace Owens and others are saying, wait, what the hell? We're going to go fight another war for Israel? And this is now what Americans are processing, right or wrong. It's the question that they're asking. And more than ever in my lifetime, and I'm old as hell, more than ever in my lifetime, I'm actually seeing Americans wholeheartedly question what the hell we're doing and why we're doing. And the motivation keeps coming back to they want to make money, they want to help Israel, they want to feed the beast that is the military-industrial complex, and it's not, those poor Iranians need democracy and we need to give it to them. So the formula, that old strategy you and I have heard so many times, it was used in Vietnam and it was used in, in Iraq. I don't think it's going to work this time. I think it's going to be really hard to fight through that. And I know that the Israelis have a lot of influence in American media. Duh, they get people like me fired. But I don't think. I think this time it's going to be a little harder to make that argument, and I think they're going to get a lot of pushback. My sense of what's going on in America.
Do you think that the war could still last many weeks, even months?
Yes.
What would be your guess?
My guess is we could still be at this 6 months from now.
That's insane. I never thought that would have happened.
I never thought Iranian missiles would be hitting 30 or 40% of their targets. I mean, I am blown away by their success rate. And I'm wondering what they're doing that we still don't know. I know the experts are saying, well, and I mentioned earlier, it's the Chinese satellite systems that have been deployed that are helping them get to their targets. And it's the fact that the Russians gave them fighter jets that are better and all these other things. But I still don't know what it is.
And there's a report. No, sure. Yeah, sorry, the fighter jets one's interesting.
I was just going to say, maybe it's the United States anti-defense system is not as good as we thought it was. Maybe the THAADs aren't the Mac Daddies that we thought they were.
On the fighter jets one, there was a report that 2 fighter jets, Iranian fighter jets, almost reached the Qatari American base in Qatar, the largest one there. They were, I think, 2 minutes away from reaching it, and then Qatari fighter jets were able to shoot down the Iranian ones, so they managed to save. That came in. So that was a report that was unconfirmed. I think CNN confirmed it about half an hour ago. I was reading it before we jumped into this interview.
And what do you make of this? Of the U.S. subs sinking the Iranian frigate off the coast of Sri Lanka? While they were doing exercises, or that may be an overstatement, while they were working in conjunction with the Indian Navy. That's a hell of a thing. That's an eye-opener. That makes you think, well, it's one thing to have all the countries near the Gulf and in that region at war, but when you start sinking ships off the coast of Sri Lanka, you start to wonder if this thing can really escalate beyond what we're thinking at this point. I mean, the United States obviously is bragging about it. They put the telescope shot out. It's the first time something like this has happened since World War II, where a U.S. submarine has shot a ship, military vessel, in open ocean with torpedoes.
The rules of engagement that we've grown up with are just getting erased one after the other. I was trying to find information on the Qatari story of the Qatari jets striking Iranian jets 2 minutes before they reached the Qatari base. They would have been able to cause extensive damage as a fighter jet striking the base. So they're much obviously harder to intercept than missiles or drones. On the
how vulnerable do you feel there? I mean, I have friends I talk to. One of my brokers is there, obviously. I mean, I've
been surprised. So Dubai's been hit. UAE's been hit more, not hit, been targeted more than Israel. And then if you look at the footage coming, that was pretty fascinating for me. The Gulf as a whole obviously has been hit more than Israel, and the UAE, which has been targeted the most out of the entire Gulf, has been targeted more than Israel. And if you look at Israel, all the footage of buildings hit, ambulances rushing. In the UAE, and that's why I've been very impressed, and other Gulf countries, they've actually, when it comes to their civilian infrastructure, they've managed to intercept most of the attacks. I think most Gulf countries, some of them got hit more than others. I think Kuwait got hit pretty hard. I think Bahrain got hit hard.
Yeah,
the UAE Saudi did a pretty good job intercepting it. But what's fascinating for me is Iran's strategy. Iran is no longer striking US bases. You said this is accidental, but they seem to be targeting, I think it's a smart strategy, to be honest. They're targeting the energy sector, which is kind of the last line. It's like the last step in the escalation ladder is the energy sector and the Strait of Hormuz. They've hit both. They've hit this. They've closed up the straits, trying to entice Trump to escort the oil tankers, which would be music to Iran's ears because they can sit there targeting those American ships. And then they've struck UAE's plan B, which is the Fujairah pipeline. I think they're doing others. They've shut down the exports, LNG exports of Qatar, which you were talking about. So they're hitting the civilian infrastructure. They're also trying to interrupt the economies of as many countries as possible, all the way up to Cyprus, just to be able to pressure the US from as many places as possible by as many leaders as possible. rather than just focusing purely on Israel as they did in the 12-day war, or focusing on Israel as an American bases, which is what most people expected when the war started. They said, hell with it. You killed our leader. You went all out during negotiations. We're going to do everything we can to cause as much damage as possible. And
but to be fair, that's what Arachi told me. You watched my interview with Arachi a week before the war started. And when I sat down with him in his office in Tehran, and I went through this plan, I said, okay, I know you're trying to do this. And I know you think you're going to have success. And he was very confident at the time. He said, Rick, I really think we're really close. I said, are you willing to give Trump something better than what you gave Obama? He said, yes. I said, what'd you give Obama? He said, 3.66. I said, well, you're going to have to give Obama something better than that. He said, we're going to have to give Trump something better than that. He says, we're going to give Trump. I know how he is with his ego, et cetera, and all these things. I said, good. Well, then it looks like you're going to be able to do something. He says, I think that's what the Americans want. And hopefully we can get them to remove some sanctions or at least promise that they're going to work on that. So, and then I said, okay, so what if it all falls apart? What if you are not able to negotiate? And then he said, then we're just going to hit all the Gulf states and hit every single piece of infrastructure that is in any way tied to America, that is in any of those countries, from UAE through Qatar, Saudi Arabia, et cetera. And I was surprised by his tone. And I said to him, I said, Mr. Minister, I'm taken aback by this because you're saying all this with a lot of bravado, but there's something in your eyes where I don't kind of believe you. And he said, and he smiled and said, you know, I'm a negotiator, man. This is what I do. You know, I'm not a warrior. I don't want a war. I don't want to fight. But if we have to fight, we'll fight, and we'll fight hard. And we've got big plans. And we know exactly what we're going to do. So I remember when I walked away from that meeting, I thought, I don't think this is going to happen, because I think these guys really want to do some serious damage. And I think they could do serious damage. Based on my conversations with people inside the U.S. military who tell me that we're a little vulnerable right now. But I guess they were able to convince Trump, no. These guys have nothing. They've got like pea shooters. We'll be done with them in a matter of hours. The whole thing will be over. We'll take out the supreme leader. We'll take out all their missile installation locations. And within a couple of hours, we'll have this country controlled, because their own people will take back their country with our help. What a stupid plan.
Yeah, the people are rallying behind the slain leader and the government instead of rallying against it like in January. It just feels
and
like
Bibi Netanyahu is moving his plane out of the country and hiding it in Berlin. And that, boy, if that's not a telltale sign.
Rick, absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you for what you're doing on your show, on the channel, with the incredible interviews people should check out. And would love to have you again, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's really a pleasure, Mario. You're a smart guy, and it's fun talking to you. Thanks.
Thank you, sir.